Welcome to Fresh Catholic, a podcast for those who are converting, reverting, or simply want a fresh perspective of the Catholic faith to help them to open their hearts and minds to become closer to the love and goodness of Christ. My daily prayer is that I will be a bright light to others, to be filled with the love and light of Christ, so that when people look at me, they see Him radiating out from me for His glory.
Hello and welcome. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. Well, here I am with my horse friends. So you just never know now where Fresh Catholic is going to be, what is going to be my background next week. Who knows? Anyway, I'm here visiting my stepdaughter, not my stepdaughter. What is she? Is she my stepdaughter? Simon's daughter. I don't even know what to call her, but anyway, Simon's family and his grandchildren. And so they have horses. So here I am today. Anyway, we are still out living the van life. And like I said, you just never know where we're going to be every week. Also, I appreciate your patience. We introduced this episode a day late, but that's how it is. We sometimes have to be spontaneous, and just some days we'll be able to record and some days we won't. So thank you for waiting for this episode. Anyway, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, if you haven't listened to the last two episodes, those two episodes have been while we're on the road. So check those out. They're done a little bit different, as is this episode. We're not in the studio anymore. So we're just out in God's studio, aren't we? Anyway, after the last episode, the one where I was talking about, who's the captain of your ship? Who is guiding your life? Of course, the answer is God. But I think sometimes, I know for speaking for myself, sometimes it's not that I forget that, it's that the world starts getting into my head, or worldly thoughts start getting into my head, worries, anxieties, things like that. And I just have to always go back to remembering that the Lord is the captain of our ship. The Lord is guiding our life. When we get off track, it's because we think we're in control, or we think other people are in control. I am so guilty of this. I find myself always thinking, because of this person, something isn't happening, or because I made this choice or whatever. I don't know. That's true. When I make bad choices, I'll own up to that. But it's more that we really do have to just remember that God is leading our lives, and we need to just surrender to that, because He knows best. And so the past couple episodes I was talking about that, our plans keep kind of just taking the windy scenic route, but not in a fun way so far. And it's frustrating sometimes because, Simon and I have a plan, we have an idea, and we're still kind of waiting. And that part is hard. The waiting, you all can identify with that. When you're having to wait to get pregnant, where's that baby? Why am I not getting pregnant? When we do, in fact, get pregnant, and then we have to wait 9 months. I want that baby to come right now. Where is my Prince Charming? When is he arriving? And then when he arrives, well, when's he going to propose? When am I going to get that better job? When am I going to make more money? There's all these things. We're always waiting. Patience is definitely a virtue. And I think we humans really struggle with that. I know I do. And so we were talking about that the past couple of episodes. And then right after we recorded last week's episode, we recorded it on a Saturday. The next day was Sunday. Please, back there. The horses just want to get in on. They want to be a podcaster for the day. Take a number, guys. Anyway, so we were headed to Mass. We were listening to Bishop Barron do his homily for last week. And if you haven't heard his homily, or if you don't listen to his weekly homilies, you should go to Word on Fire and listen. They're very well done. He's one of my favorite priests, bishops, and theologians. And when he was doing his homily, Simon and I really felt like he was speaking to us, because he was talking about, in your life when, there's all these different times of your life when you're venturing out, which, really reminded us of us because we're venturing out. And he was talking about, when, like the saints, if you go back to the saints' stories, they all ventured out. They didn't just kind of stay put and stay stagnant and not act. They were brave. They went out and did these ventures and adventures. And he was saying, that's a part of the whole thing. And, I was kind of joking, not joking with Simon, but I said, when people say, when I want to be a saint. And I think when I first became Catholic, I had a different vision of saints. I didn't know like just normal everyday people could become saints. Well, it's that they are extraordinary people. They have a complete devotion to the Lord. They have just given everything, mind, body, and spirit to him and done miraculous things, and they become saints. We're all capable of being saints. But what Bishop Barron was talking about was, in order to, lead a saintly life, you have to go against challenges. You have to go, there's adversity. There are challenges. There are obstacles in the road. People don't just waltz into being a saint. They don't just walk in, I think I deserve to be a saint now. That's just not how it goes. And so he was like giving his story about, when you kind of get comfy and cozy in your spiritual life, that's when you probably need to shake it up a bit, or God will shake it up for you. Otherwise, you're just sitting in a cozy space. Nothing wrong with cozy spaces, but like Bishop Barron was saying, when he first became a priest, he was in Chicago. He felt very at home there. That's where he was raised, and he felt great there. And then he was sent out to Los Angeles, to the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, and consequently, he was living in Santa Barbara, which is very close to where we are. And he became very, he said it was a huge adjustment. It wasn't what he was used to. It really rocked his boat. He didn't use those terms. I'm paraphrasing, but he had to come out to Santa Barbara. He had to figure out how to live out on the West Coast. And not that he was complaining, it's just, it kind of changed his whole plan. And then once he kind of got comfy and cozy there, he was sent out to Minnesota, where he is now. And so, and again, had to refigure his life. But he was talking about how that was good. It's good when you have to do that. It's good when there's changes, and God knows where you're supposed to be. And it might be for you. It might be to help you to become closer to the Lord. It might, when you have challenges, it's refining you. It's helping you to become who you're supposed to be. If you're always doing the same thing every day and around the same people and, kind of living a predictable life, that is not really how the lives of saints are, certainly. And so we just kind of really felt like he was kind of talking to us. And when he was talking about, trying to go on an adventure, trying to trust in the Lord, trying to know that he knows best, that really resonated with us. Then we went to Mass, and the priest that day was doing his homily about a similar thing. So I was just like, oh, well, this is, again, I'm not making it all about Simon and I that day, but, that's what the Lord does, is he sends people or scripture or just things in nature or things in our life to make us realize this is the way the Lord talks to us sometimes, is through other people and other things. And so, the day I had recorded the other episode, it was a really rough day for me. I really didn't want to record that episode, and I was feeling pretty low and pretty down. And then I heard those two homilies, and I just thought, it's true. We just have to trust in the Lord, know that even when things are taking time or when our plans shift and change, that we're supposed to, happily and willingly go along with it. And that is hard because we're human, and that is hard because we are impatient as humans. But it also reminded me that, we are in Lent. A big part of Lent is finding our way, refining ourselves, going back. And Bishop Barron was talking about, when athletes have like spring training for baseball, they go back and they have to relearn or revisit how they learned. And he gave a story of, I'm not a baseball fan, but he was giving the story of, I guess, one of the top players. I don't know if it was currently or in the past, but that player would reach out to his like little league coach to go back to the basics of how, let's go through the basics of baseball. Let's go through so that I can refine every year. Every year that we get older, just because you're older and maybe you're wiser, it doesn't mean you are beyond going back and remembering basics. The basics of, why do you want to follow the Lord? Why do you want to be a Christian? Why do you want to be Catholic? Why do you want to raise your family in this way? Why do you want to, put Christ at the front of your life and the top of your priority pyramid? Why do you want to do those things? Why do you love these things? What have caused you to love the Lord, the sacraments, the Gospels? Go back and just kind of start from square one. It's okay. There's just learn more. You can always learn more. And the more that we do that, especially during Lent, that's a perfect time. If you don't do it just regularly, try to read the scriptures, read the Gospels, go to Mass, go to confession. All those things are what's making you into a strong, thriving Catholic. And so I just really appreciated those homilies. It kind of gave me a better attitude for the week. We, again, our plans kind of got a little detour. And instead of like being miserable about it, or just like, I had my moments. I'll be honest with you. I kind of go up and down during the day. I'll think, oh my gosh, I just really want to get going on this adventure we're wanting to do. But for the most part, those homilies really helped. The fact they were talking also about Lent, just again, refining ourselves, getting in the right mindset during Lent. It's not just about giving up things. It's about really strengthening our belief system, strengthening the Catholic teachings, all those things. And it helps when you can, read more of the Bible, get involved in Lenten activities. Going to the Stations of the Cross is great. And, I think our Lenten practices are really good evangelization tools also, because I know, like, I have people ask me different questions. Like the other night we were having dinner and I said, oh, it's Friday. We need to make sure that our dinner doesn't have any meat in it. And, then you explain why, and then I took it a step farther and I said, I don't eat meat all year on Fridays. I do that practice. And so that opens a conversation, And so I think Lent is a great time for inward reflection, honing in on your skills, sharpening those skills, and also, just it's a good opportunity to talk to people who might be Catholic or aren't really remembering different things about the Catholic faith, or for people who aren't Catholic but are interested. We always have to have our ears perked open to opportunities where we can, just be a living example of, we're doing these things because we're Catholic and we feel strongly about them, and we want to be closer to the Lord. So those are things I wanted to say about that. And then this week's gospel was the woman at the well. And I not only, did the daily readings. Again, if you don't listen to the daily readings every day. They're on all major platforms and YouTube, so go check those out. But when I did that gospel reading for Sunday's Mass, it's very long. It's one of the longer gospels. And I believe we read it every year during Lent. And like I've kind of said in past episodes, just because you hear the same stories every year, or when you go to Mass every day and you go, oh, I've heard this story before. Oh, I've read this gospel before. And I've heard it a million times. Same with the woman in the well. This year, for whatever reason, I was very in tune to it this year. I read it for my podcast. I did a short video on YouTube, on YouTube, and also Instagram and Facebook about the woman at the well. And then I kind of did a little bit more research on it. And it really, this year, I was focusing on the part where, and again, I'm sure you've heard the story before. You probably know way more about it than I do. But for those of you who don't, what I appreciated about it this year was hearing the story again and realizing when the woman went to the well, she went in the middle of the day and Jesus was already sitting there and he was by himself. I mean, to me, that would be a dream come true. If I went to go fetch water and Jesus was sitting there, I would be a dream come true. But what I've heard before, but it didn't resonate with me before, and it did now, is she was going to the well at noon because that's the hottest time of day. And she was feeling some shame because she had and was living a sinful life. And so she didn't want to go during the day. Typically the women went to get the water, and she didn't want to encounter the other women.
We'll be right back. What does it mean to live a life of faith? What does it mean to live as a Catholic Christian? Hi, this is Bishop Kevin Sweeney, host of the podcast Beyond the Beacon. Join me as we unravel and discuss the mysteries of our faith, of the church, of living as Catholic Christians. Be inspired by engaging interviews with priests and seminarians, deacons, religious, women and men who live the life of faith day by day here in our Diocese of Patterson, in food pantries and classrooms and parishes and ministry. How is God working in their lives today? How is God working in our lives? Join me as I ask them and be part of the conversation on Beyond the Beacon. Listen and follow Beyond the Beacon wherever you get your podcasts, or watch it on my YouTube channel. Please check the show notes for more details. Thank you and God bless you.
And so she went during the middle of the day when she felt that nobody would be there and probably wouldn't be, approached or shunned, more importantly, by other people. And so the whole gospel is basically about the water. They're using the story of the water in the well, and that Jesus is there and he asks for a drink. And so she has this encounter with him, and she's wondering, why would he ask her? Because his type of person and her type of person typically wouldn't be in talking to each other. He wouldn't be talking to a woman who's a Samaritan, all these different things. And so he has this moment with her, and he's talking about, basically quenching a thirst. And she's taking him very literally, like, well, here's your water. And he says, well, this, I have, like a living water, which she's then thinking, like a spring of water, because the water in the well, of course, is stagnant. It's just sitting there. And so they have this encounter, and she's kind of misunderstanding him. And you know how Jesus talks to people in parables, and kind of the way he talks is, it's kind of confusing most of the time, I would say. And so what's interesting is one of the people that I heard explaining this were talking about when you, in the middle of the day, if the sun is overhead, you can see straight down into the well, and you can see, that there's not that much water in there. And so when Jesus is talking about getting more water, she is looking and she can see down in the well. It's not unclear. It's very clear. She can see that there's not that much water in the well. And again, it's kind of somewhat confusing, but he's talking about the living water of, becoming a follower of Christ, and you're your thirst will never be quenched by physical water. He's talking about, the food and drink of his, it's just constant. We'll never be without it if we're a follower of him. And I just was thinking, he talked to her about like what, he was asking her questions. They were having a conversation. He knew things about her that he wouldn't know because he's a stranger there. And so, this was kind of eye-opening to her. And then she realized, oh, he must be a prophet because he knows things that, well, how would he know? And I just was thinking, when people are in sin, I mean, I've been in sin. We're all sinners. So when you're in sin and you're kind of like off track and God isn't in your life, and he's not, if he is, he's not present in your life. He's not guiding your life at that moment. And you're making poor decisions and you're making worldly decisions. And, when you finally get realigned with Jesus, you have to remember that there's so much more to your life then. These things of the world, these sins that we're stuck in, like she was, the woman at the well was stuck in sin. He wants us to open our eyes to that. He wants us to confess those things. He wants us to acknowledge them, be sorry for them, sin no more. He's offering us things that are eternal. You can drink a glass of water, but then you're going to be thirsty soon enough. You can eat of something. That's the thing that's so enticing about sin is that, oh, I'm just going to be insatiable in my drink and in my eating and in, promiscuity, vices. You can never get enough of those things. You're always going to want more, money, greed, all these things. And what Jesus is offering is just such pure life. It's just pure life. He is the answer to all those things. And those things are frivolous. Those things are fleeting. He is forever. He is forever. We have to remember, we have a life after this worldly life. God willing, we're going to heaven. And then we won't be in need of anything. But if you don't get that straight here on earth, the odds of you not getting that eternal life with Jesus, that's not looking really great. That's what's really scary when people look to these worldly things, look to these fleeting things. And even when I get caught up in that, I'll get caught up in that. And I'm consciously trying not to do that. Imagine the people who don't have the Lord in their life. Imagine the people who haven't found him yet. Or imagine the people who knew him, found him, and then decide, oh, you know what? What he's offering isn't important. What's more important are these worldly things that I need right now. I want them right now. I want them in my way, in my timing. I'm in charge of my life. I'm manifesting these things. Well, the scary thing is, what I see happening is people will get things. They'll get things quickly. They'll get things, to abundance. And then what happens is, if you think about right now off the top of your head, think about just 3 people, whether they're famous people, not famous people, people you maybe in the past. Think of 3 people and think those people probably it looks like they have everything. They have everything at their fingertips. But when they go to bed at night or when they wake up in the morning, do they have the Lord in their mind, first thing in their mind? Do they seek like things that are of God? Or do they seek things of this world that they must have right this second? So that's why I'm saying, like, when I'm sitting here going, I want this thing right now, God, I'm starting to fall into that. I don't want to do that. But I'm catching myself. I'm catching myself. I'm praying. I'm going, Lord, I don't want to be thinking that way. Lord, I'm laying all these worries and these anxieties at your feet. Lord, I know you're taking care of us. I know you're providing for us. I'm constantly throughout the day just trying to get back on track and to not let myself drift off and to be, it's hard when things are sparkly over here and things are like, you're looking over here and going, well, that person has that. Why can't I have that? I don't want that. I want to keep straight, looking at the Lord, looking at Jesus. I'm imagining him saying, come with me, come to me. I've got you. It's going to be okay. And like I said, it's not easy. It's a struggle, but that's, what we have to focus on. We have to remember that he knows best, and these other things aren't worth it in the long run, and it's a really good time during Lent to be reminded of that, so that then after Lent, like I've said in the past, if you have, 40 days of Lent and then you end up wanting to, get a better habit or get a better plan, you have another 50 days of Easter. And then that should really help you on your way to make this, an all day, everyday goal, is to just be focused on what the Lord is trying to show you, what he's trying to offer you, and to not be dazzled by these worldly things, because ultimately, they're not going to get you into heaven. We've talked about that a lot on the podcast. So I just really appreciated the woman at the well. I read it a few times. So like that really helped me to realize that, she wasn't looking for him that day. He was looking for her. He knew she would be there. He knows where we are. He's waiting for us. He is very patient. He lets us have our free will. He lets us, stumble and fall and go down a bad path. He's not doing that to hurt and harm us. He's doing it so that we can learn our lessons. We will strive to want to, be with him, follow his path for us. And, I really do pray for people who don't have him, or who have forgotten him, or who are pushing him to the side. That's a real slippery slope, and a real dangerous slope to go down, is to not allow him to, again, be the captain of your ship, or to guide where you're supposed to be going and what you're supposed to be doing. So this Lent, moving forward, I'm just really encouraging you to go back and read the Gospels. Try to figure out what you need in your life that needs refining. Not everybody has the same thing at the same time. I think, it's good to really figure out, where am I struggling? Where am I don't want to use the word failing, because failing almost sounds like you can never recover from that. I think a lot of people, get distracted, but try to kind of think, where do I need to refine my life with the Lord? Where do I need to fix some things, change some things? Be honest with yourself. Nobody, if you're telling yourself, oh, I've got, this whole Lent, I've got this figured out. Everything's easy peasy. Me and the Lord were like this all the time. Well, I don't think that's being very honest. And so, that's something we strive for sainthood. It's not too lofty a goal. We can, the steps to get there are the journey. And, kind of in closing of this episode, I was thinking just recently, how they always say that, well, I'll get this wrong, but, it's not the end, or wherever you end up, it's the journey and how you get there. That's where the lessons are learned. And if anything, I'm definitely learning on this adventure we're on, is that I do really need to work on patience. I do really need to work on trusting that God has a plan for us, and that, we may never know what it is, but we just need to really trust and just take a step at a time. And instead of trying to look for the end, goal, try to just take each day and say, what did I learn today? Or what was the gift of today? What could this, maybe not try to dissect it and say, well, what's God trying to show me? And Simon's always telling me, you don't always have to have a lesson and everything, or there doesn't always have to be a sign and all these things. And I'm big on, well, that's a sign. And he always says, you don't need to always have a sign. And so that's something I need to really work on, is just like taking the day or the moment for what it is, knowing that the Lord is with me, knowing he's protecting us, he's providing for us. There's a reason for everything. And just to try to enjoy each day and not be so fixated on the end, the end goal or whatever that may be. And one last thing, sorry, I know I said that before, but the other thing I was thinking last night is one of the reasons that Simon and I, packed up our stuff and moved into the van on our adventure, seeking where God wants us to go. I personally am trying to seek peace and calm. And I realized last night, we went to bed really late, and we were both really exhausted, and we were just provided like a place to stay, a safe place to stay for the night. And I just thought, gosh, it doesn't really matter where I go. It doesn't really matter if I'm living in a rental house, if I'm living in a van, if I'm, staying with friends, if I have my own home. It doesn't really matter where I am. What matters is that I have Jesus with me in my heart, in my soul, with me always. It doesn't matter where I am. It just matters that he's with me. And so maybe that's part of the lesson, is I'm seeking peace, but he's my peace. So with that, I will see you next week. Where? Who knows? So bye to my horsey friends, and bye to you. And I hope you're watching the newer episodes, and tell all your friends. And I hope you continue to have a wonderful, beautiful Lent. Thanks for coming today. Thank you. Love you. Bye.
Thank you for joining me today. Now go out and be a bright light in someone's life. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh.